Assalamu alaikum. This is Mubarakah. It is 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and as promised, we are live here on the Fit Muslimah fan page, and we are talking about Ramadan today. So, I gave a webinar, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, and we spoke a little bit about Ramadan and nutritional habits that we should adopt during the month of Ramadan, but several people could not attend, which is absolutely fine. I know that my time may not coincide with other people's time, and so I've been getting some questions on the messages asking me for tips for Ramadan. So I'm not going to go over everything I went over during the webinar, but I will talk about some very specific things about Ramadan that I think that is really important for us to be aware of and to pay attention to. And if you have any questions, or if you're one of those people that sent me a message and I don't get to it, then make sure that you certainly ask it down in the chat. So thank you for joining me. First of all, I want to say to everybody who is tuning in, who may not be familiar with Ramadan, because I know that we have people, even though this is Fit Muslimah fan page, we give health and nutrition advice for all walks of life, and we have people who are not Muslim who may be watching. So what I'm going to go over really quickly is kind of like, what is the Muslim perception of fasting? So in about 8 days, we will start 8 days or so, we will start the Muslim month of Ramadan. And the month of Ramadan is a very holy and spiritual month for Muslims. We fast from dawn until dusk. So I say in about 8 days because Muslim months go by a lunar calendar as opposed to a solar calendar. So the calendar that we follow in general that tells us today is May the 30th, yeah. That tells us that today is May the 30th, is a solar calendar. So it's determined by how many times the sun rises. As opposed to the Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar, and it goes by the new moon. So when the moon is sighted, we start fasting the next day. And then when the moon is sighted again at the end of the month, we stop fasting. And fasting means abstinence from food, from drink, and if you are married, from sexual intercourse with your partner. So that's the very basic minimal of fasting. Of course, you should also refrain from other sins, and you should engage in extra good acts. So when we say from food and drink, that means that no, we can't even have water. So there's no food, there's no drink. People who are exempt for fasting is people who have a chronic illness, or even if it's a temporary illness where fasting will exacerbate the illness or threaten their life. So if you have, for example, hypoglycemia, where you have to eat every so often, or people with diabetes, these type of people do not have to fast, so they are exempt in Islam. There's always an exception to the rule if you fall inside of that category. So I want to make sure that everybody understand what we're talking about when we're talking about fasting. So Assalamu alaikum. Alamin from Nigeria, thank you for logging on. And Fatima and Bunda, assalamu alaikum, thank you for coming. So we are talking here about Ramadan and fasting, and from everybody in the United States and Canada and probably half of the world, we are in summertime. And what that means is, so I am on Eastern Standard Time, which is New York time, quote unquote. I live in Connecticut, which is about an hour from New York, 45 minutes to an hour from the New York line. But what that means is that we're going to be fasting really long days. So really long days mean that we will start fasting at about 3:30 in the morning, and we will break our fast at about 8:15 at night. That is a really long time to go without food and drink. It's not impossible. We've done it the last 3 or 4 years, we've had these 18-hour fasts. In some parts of the world, they're actually fasting for 20 straight hours and only not fasting 4 hours. And we do this for consecutive days. So what does that mean for us? So I want us as Muslims to be very realistic that this is physically challenging. Yes, it is a command from Allah. Yes, it is something that we are obligated to do, but it is not easy, right? If it was easy, everybody would do it, as they say, right? So it's not easy. So let's not go and approach the month in a way where it's almost like we're pretending like everything is so easy and we don't have to prepare for it. You certainly have to prepare for Ramadan. So just as we prepare for it emotionally, just as we prepare for it spiritually, you also have to prepare for it physically. Going that long without food or drink, you have to make sure that you stay hydrated. Hydration is probably the key concern during this month, that you are drinking enough and eating enough high water content foods that you do not become dehydrated. So how do you do that and drink enough water when you go 18 hours and you can't eat or drink anything? So here is the first tip that I have for you. Make sure that you drink small increments of water throughout the evening. For example, I'm going to give you a sample schedule that can get you about 70 ounces of water. So first of all, the first rule is the human body does not have the capacity to absorb more than about 10 to 20 ounces of water every 20 minutes. So what does that mean? That means that most of the time when people drink lots of water and then they're like, oh, I have to pee right away, or I can't even hold the water, I'm drinking too much. Generally, they are drinking too much. If you sit down and you drink 32 ounces of water, your body physiologically cannot absorb all of that water, even if your muscles are dehydrated. Your body just can't absorb it and use it. So it filters the extra water into your bladder, and that's why you have to pee. So one of the things that you can do is make sure that your water you're drinking small amounts at a time. So for example, say you break fast with 10 ounces of water. This is the sunnah anyway. And for my people who are not Muslim, sunnah is the example of the Prophet. That's a simple explanation of the sunnah. So we break fast with dates and water. Say you have 10 ounces, right? So you're going to have 10 ounces. And then by the time you make salah and eat, it's about 20 minutes, 30 minutes later, right? So you have another 10 ounces when you eat, after you eat and make salah, right? So now you've made Maghrib. And then you are going to have another 10 ounces right before you make Isha. So you're going to give yourself, it's about another hour or so before Isha comes in. And then that's another 10 ounces. So now you're at 20 ounces. Okay, so Isha has gone by. You've gone to the masjid. It's time for Tawri. Before the prayer starts, you drink another 10 ounces. So now we're at 30 ounces, right? And you know that in between the prayer, there is the break between the prayer. You drink another 10 ounces during the break. You're at 40 ounces. You're doing pretty good, right? Now the prayer is over. We know that's going to take another hour, right? So an hour later, you drink 10 ounces before you leave the masjid on your way home, right? That's 50 ounces, right? By the time you get home, you get into your pajamas, get ready to get in bed. Right before you go to bed, you drink another 10 ounces. You are at 60 ounces. As soon as you get up in the morning, before you even go and make yourself something to eat, you drink another 10 ounces. You're at 70 ounces. So that is how you can get your water in during the month of Ramadan. You want to make sure that you have that water bottle attached to you. So this Ramadan, I want you to make sure that you have a water bottle, that you are carrying it with you every time you go to the masjid. If you are in charge of the masjid and in charge of iftar, make sure you make lots of water available to people, right? If you are in charge of the masjid, or if you're hosting an iftar, water, not soda, not juice, water. Water is absolutely essential, and nothing hydrates you as well as water. So that is my first tip for you. My second tip for you when it comes to the second most common question I get asked is, what is the best suhoor to eat, right? The meal that we eat in the morning before the day starts. What is the best thing for us to eat? And there's lots of posts. I think even BuzzFeed has something of like the 21 best suhoors. And alhamdulillah, all of that is great. But when it comes to choosing foods that are best for you, I want you to determine how good it is based on the macronutrients. So macronutrients is fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, right? So no matter what you look at, no matter what country you live in, what your cultural foods are, macronutrients are macronutrients. We just combine them in different ways to make it a cultural food. So the most important macronutrient that you need to eat during suhoor is going to be protein, right? So it doesn't matter if you have that, Sana, you were saying granola and muesli. You can have that, but it is not enough protein. And let me tell you, you can have it, but you have to add the protein to it. And this is why. Protein keeps you full longer. It stays in your system longer, and so it's going to give you a constant source of energy. When you start your day off with carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are high carb meals, I'm going to mention a few things that are very common. It doesn't mean that you should not have them. It means that you have to have them in addition to your protein, right? So granola and muesli is something that is really common, great thing to have, but it does not have a lot of protein in it, right? The other thing that is really common is we talk about having green smoothies a lot on this page, and it's kind of like a little trend thing going on. Everybody wants to like pulverize their fruits and vegetables, right? we love smoothies now because nobody wants to actually eat fruits and vegetables. We need to pulverize them and drink them, right? They're great, but they are very high in percentage of carbohydrates. Fruits have lots of carbs in them, right? It is not the best source of protein, right? The other thing that people may have is maybe pancakes or oatmeal or grits. All of these things are certainly not bad things to eat during Ramadan, but make sure you combine them with a protein source. So a protein source could be any type of dairy. So that you can have Greek yogurt has a really high protein source. What else? Greek yogurt has a high protein source. Cottage cheese have a high protein source. If you don't do animal products, certainly you can get some protein powder, a vegetable-based protein powder from the local store, but whey protein. And then of course, any of the animal proteins, beef, chicken, fish, all of that, you can certainly have that as protein sources. And those are whole food sources that you can have for suhoor, because remember, the important thing is that the protein is what's going to keep you energized throughout your day. And that is going to be super important, because particularly living in non-Muslim countries and Western countries, our day and schedule don't change because Muslims have Ramadan, right? Your boss still expects you to be on time. It still expects you to complete your projects on time. You still have to go to school if you're in school. They expect you to get your work done, right? Things don't change because we're fasting. In some Muslim countries in Ramadan, they can take the whole month off, or they can work half days, and alhamdulillah, that's a barakah that they have. But for us who have to continue our normal schedule to the best of our ability, preventing fatigue and making sure that you stay full as long as you can throughout the day is really important. And the way that you're going to do that is the foods that you can intake that break down slower in your system is going to last you longer. So here's an example or some samples of how long it takes food to break down in your system. Fruits and vegetables take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, and then it's through your system. It's from one end to the other. It's been absorbed. It's done its thing with your insulin level, and it's gone, right? You're not going to have a banana in the morning and still working off the energy of that banana at 12 o'clock. It just doesn't happen like that physiologically. The other thing is grains like oatmeal, the granola we mentioned, rice, bread. That takes anywhere between an hour to 2 hours in your system. So really hard grains, say you have a barley bread or you have a raw muesli, that's going to take about 2 hours for your system to break it down and digest it. All right. Fish and chicken takes about 4 hours, 4 hours max. So if you have like a turkey sausage in the morning, about 4 hours it's going to be in your system. There is one type of protein that I recommend that stays in your system for 12 straight hours. 7 to 12 hours is what the research shows us. And it's called casein protein. Casein. Casein protein is derived from milk. You can buy it as a powder inside of any vitamin or supplement shop, or any health food store generally will have it. It's going to be in the section with whey protein. Whey protein is another milk-derived protein. And I recommend this specifically during Ramadan because the way that casein protein is metabolized is that when it goes inside of your body, it gels around the protein molecules. And so your body has to break the gel apart and to get to the protein to digest it all. And that takes your body about 7 to 12 hours to do. So you might find it if you have like a supplement store that caters to bodybuilders, they use it a lot. But for Ramadan in particular, it's really helpful. I'm telling you, I discovered this about 3 years ago. It just changed the game. Right? You like really do feel full throughout your day, and you really do, it does give you some sustained energy. So that is what I would recommend for the for suhoor in the morning time. Make sure that you're obviously the health, the general healthy rules, which is, try to have balanced meals, fruits and vegetables, along with your whole grains and lean proteins. But having that source of casein, or at minimum having some source of protein in the morning, is what's going to be the most important in keeping your system going. If you have any questions along the way, you can just put them inside of the chat, because I can just read them as I go along. So I'm trying to remember some of the questions that I was asked inside of my messages, so that I can make sure that they get answered. Also, let's talk to the exercisers, right? This is probably another really, really common question. After the what do I eat for suhoor question is, do I exercise in Ramadan question? Certainly number 2. So, the answer is yes, but be very strategic on how and when you exercise. So when we exercise, or when we do any activity, when you do any activity, really quick, Maria, casein protein is spelled Casein, right? And Sadia, yes, eggs are a good source of protein. Yes. So exercise in Ramadan. So this is the thing about exercising in Ramadan. You can do non-strenuous cardiovascular activities when you are fasting. I do not recommend, and I highly advise against you doing any type of strength training or intense exercise that's going to make your muscles sore. So think of intensity as like, this workout is so hard, I know I'm going to be sore for 2 days. If you are doing that while you are fasting, then you are sabotaging yourself. Like physiologically, the way that our body works. So this is kind of like the physiology of how we get energy, and the physiology of how our body builds and break down muscle. So ultimately, our goal, if you are an exerciser, your goal is physically is to be either faster, stronger, or more fit, right? And all of that requires muscle strength. So we want to either gain or maintain the amount of muscles that we have, right? That's what we call our lean muscle. You hear that a lot, right? So when you exercise or when you do any activity, your body gets its energy source from 3 places. It's only 3 places it gets its energy source, which is glucose, right? Every food we eat, we take in, most of it breaks down into glucose, and with the glucose in our system is how our body obtains energy, converts that into energy. Glucose is stored in your blood, it's stored inside of your muscles, and it's stored inside of your liver. So those are the 3 places. And the liver gets it from your stored fat, right? So when we want to lose weight, ultimately we want to get as much from that liver, that stored fat conversion, as we possibly can, right? We want to minimize how much muscle breakdown that we're trying to achieve. Your blood is kind of like the first source. That's where it's going to go to for to get the glucose. The other thing that happens when you exercise, when your muscles are sore, is when we exercise, we create little micro tears, like, you know, sounding like the space between my fingers. You create little micro tears in your muscles, and your body fills that muscle, those micro tears up, and that's how your muscles grow. So I'll take the example, say you decided to do, I don't know, jump squats or something, or an intense leg workout, right? If you're doing this in the middle of your fast, your body is going to immediately start looking for a food source in order to rebuild that muscle, right? So you can't eat, you've done this at 12 o'clock and you're not eating for another 8 hours, so you have absolutely nothing. What your muscles are going to do is your body is going to now go to other muscles in your body to take away muscle protein in order to help your legs. So you ultimately end up weaker because your body is cannibalizing itself in order for it to rebuild the muscle that you just worked super hard. So if you are a resistance training person, and you should not give it up throughout the month, the best time for you to do it is within an hour of iftar, because you'll be able to eat after, because the important part of doing resistance training or any intense exercise is the ability to eat within an hour time frame, right? So you want to do that about an hour, no more than an hour before iftar, or you're going to do it at night. I do not recommend that people engage in intense exercise during the day while you are fasting. The second thing is, can you walk? Sure. Can you run? Sure. It all depends on your personal fitness level and your personal goals. So, for example, if you are normally used to, say, running 5 miles a day, and you get up in the middle of the day or whatever, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and you're fasting and you go out and you run 2 miles, for you, that may not be difficult. So you should be okay. You know, your muscles isn't working super hard in order for that to happen. For somebody who 2 miles is, you know, hard for them, and they decide in Ramadan I'm going to go and I'm going to jog 3 today, or I'm going to do a 5K in the middle of the day, that is intense exercise for you. So go according to your personal fitness level, whatever intensity. If you're used to running marathons, then running 5 miles may be nothing for you to do while you're fasting. Absolutely fine. So go according to your own personal fitness level. I recommend that people decrease the intensity. Certainly do not set weight loss and fitness goals during Ramadan. Number one, it distracts you from the intentions and the purpose of the month, which is spiritual development. And number two, it also it's really difficult for your body to improve when you are going so long without food. So adjust your goals to maintain. Like, if I can do 20 military push-ups at the beginning of Ramadan, then my goal is to be able to do 20 military push-ups at the end of Ramadan to make sure that I didn't lose any muscle strength or muscle power, right? So that's a maintenance goal. If I'm able to run 3 miles easy before Ramadan started, my goal is I still want to be able to do it just as easy when Ramadan is over. So that's a maintenance goal, as opposed to I'm going to run a marathon 2 days after Ramadan is over and I'm going to be training throughout Ramadan. Not the best idea, right? So, because in the end, even if you feel like you're able to do it, even if you feel you will sabotage yourself, that's just physiologically how our body works. So I'm going to look for a couple of questions. How about soup? I must want to know about soup. Again, I'm not so concerned or have such high recommendations for any particular type of food, because everybody has a different cultural culinary preference. Think about the macronutrients, right? If you're having it for sahur, make sure it has protein. Even if it has carbs, even if it has fat, whatever else has in it, it must have protein. That is the best thing, right? So soups is fine. Make sure it has a protein, a bean, a chicken, something like that. What juices do you recommend? I really don't recommend juice, to be honest. So I'll tell you why. Me personally, I don't want to lie. I hardly ever buy juice for my household. I stopped buying juice for my kids probably, 5 years ago. Maybe every 6 months or so, I'll see a juice on sale and it's a really cheap price and it's a good juice, which means it doesn't have any high fructose corn syrup. And I will get it for my kids and give it to them as a treat. And I let them drink it up in a day, and that's all the juice they get. And in the next 6 months, we'll see another sale. And the reason why I don't recommend juice is because it's liquid calories, and it's a concentration of sugar that nature did not intend for you to drink, right? Allah gave us an orange that has fiber and other thing that mitigates the sugar in an orange. 1/2 a cup of orange juice is like the juice and the sugar that's in like 6 oranges. Most people wouldn't sit down and actually eat 6 oranges, so why do you need to drink the juice of 6 oranges? So I personally don't recommend juice, so I don't have a recommendation for you. Muna, I don't know what you mean by there will be no correct sister. And Mishkat said, how do you stay hydrated during the day of Ramadan? You probably logged on late, Mishkat, and I actually went through a very specific schedule of drinking water. So when the live feed is over, just go back and view the video, and it's like within like the first 10 minutes of it. So there will be massive muscle loss if one doesn't work out during Ramadan. I wouldn't say massive, but you will certainly lose muscle. You will certainly lose. So in general, my orthopedic actually told me this. A couple of years ago, I tore my pectoral muscle, and he kept reminding me that when you work out and you miss a workout, it takes about 3 workouts for you to regain that strength, right? So if you're going all Ramadan and you are not exercising at all, you can expect a really big setback as far as strength, as far as muscle, as far as speed. If you're a runner, you can expect a big, massive, I wouldn't say massive, but it would be definitely noticeable. So Iman said, what do you recommend for someone who is on a fitness diet to lose fat and is trying to keep it up in Ramadan? What foods do you recommend apart from protein? I would recommend that you continue whatever plan you're doing. You just readjust your schedule for the evening time. So you may have, your iftar is your dinner meal, have a snack somewhere between Isha and Taraweeh, and have the same healthy breakfast, which hopefully, if you're following a good plan, includes protein for breakfast. So I would recommend that you continue your plan. If your goal is weight loss, I don't suggest that the mistake that people make is they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to have so much self-control in Ramadan. I'm going to lose 5 pounds a week and it's going to be awesome and it's going to put me ahead of my weight loss goals. You will lose weight in Ramadan, especially now that it's in the summertime, but it's not going to be lasting weight loss. I think we all know you lose the weight in Ramadan and within like a month or two it all comes back because you're just eating more, right? So, but if your goal is weight loss, there's certainly no reason, if you're sticking to your plan, that you should gain weight during the month. We gain weight because honestly, we totally overeat, right? So let's help one another by, if you're hosting an iftar, don't always just use it as excuse to make all of the cheap foods that you wouldn't eat throughout the whole year. Maybe make a dessert and something sweet to, give people the sweetness, but also have salads and grilled stuff and all of the good stuff that we need. So we can help each other out, because one of the dilemmas, of course, is that, we frequent the masjid a lot. We have iftar with friends, and then everybody wants to get all of the barakats of feeding a fasting person. So we lay out this big spread of way more than what the people in our that we've invited over could eat. So I would say, you still get the same barakah, whether or not the chicken is fried or is baked. You still get the same barakah, whether or not you serving white rice or you serving brown rice. Still the same barakah. So make sure that we help each other out during this month. Bisharu, I recommended some foods at the beginning, so when we're done, you can scroll back. The video will stay on the page, and you can go back to the beginning, and we talked about kind of like some very specific stuff that you should definitely eat, particularly protein for suhoor. Okay. Isn't Qiyamul Layl good enough exercise? No. I'm gonna be straight up with you. Nusheen, no. The whole idea that making salah is exercise for our lifestyle, no, it is not exercise. I did this little experiment where I had people on the page to look at their Fitbit. I have Fitbit. See, that's my little Fitbit watch that calculates literally moment by moment your activity level and how many calories that you burn. And we looked at Salah. Someone made Dhuhr. I think somebody else told me after they made Isha. The average amount of calories that you burn making Salah is 5. 5. That's it. So for people who have vacuum cleaners, we're not sweeping by hand or on our hands and knees mopping. We have dishwashers. We have kids like I do. We drive in cars. We're not walking from place to place. Salah is not enough exercise. So Mishkat said, which dry fruit can be considered as a good source of energy during Ramadan? So let me say this about dry fruit. It's not really a good source of energy. It's a good source of immediate energy, but what we talked about earlier was that fruit is metabolized very quickly in your system. And dried fruit in particular is kind of concentrated sugar. So that is something else. It's not that I don't recommend that people have dried fruit. I think that if it's a snack that you're having that's incorporated with some nuts, like some trail mix, it's a great option for a snack during the day. But it is not, and don't let anybody trick you into thinking it is not a lasting source of energy. Physiologically, it just does not last in your system that long, right? So it doesn't matter what product somebody sells you, and this combination is going to keep you full the whole day long. If you have dates and an apple, if physiologically it's impossible. If you're a human being, it's not going to keep you full all day long, right? So again, something that is not on my high recommendation list for Ramadan, that would be dried fruit. Daratu. I'll be on the road a lot this Ramadan. What is something that I can take to go for iftar or suhoor if I'm on the road? I think the casein protein that we talked about earlier is actually a really good quick road thing. So when I travel, I actually bring protein powder with me because one, it's a powder and it does not liquefy until you add liquid to it. And number two, it's a good source of protein. And if you want to add carbs to it, you can just add milk and you have the carbs from the milk, or you can add juice to it and have the carbs from the juice. Very small amount of juice though. Remember we talked about juice has a lot of sugar in it. So I think that would be a really good. And also we talked earlier about a little bit of trail mix, but for protein purposes for sahur, I think protein powders are a great travel accompaniment because it's just really convenient. You know, every time I travel, I'm always afraid that they're going to look in my bag and they're going to be like, what's this white powder stuff? So I normally write on big letters like whey protein. So they can know that it's whey protein. But I think that's actually is what I would suggest as far as like if you're in a car and you can't get to some place to actually sit down and eat or make your own food. Some suggestions for iftar time food one can have. Light and filling. Light and filling. Almost like an oxymoron, but I think that in the evening time, again, if you want to, protein is a very important macronutrient. I would have to suggest protein. I would have to suggest sticking to whole grains. Now, even though we do almost the direct opposite, this is the time more than any to reduce the sugar and the junk in our diets, because sugar is a zapper of energy. It just sucks the energy right out of you. So if you are waking up in the morning and you are having pancakes for breakfast, and every night after iftar you're having ice cream and cake, if you're having ice cream and cake after iftar and you're just continuing to eat a lot of sweets and sugar, then you are going to feel drained throughout the day. So to avoid that, make sure that you try to reduce that during this month. A realistic diet chart for Ramadan. I don't think that I have the time or effort. You know what? Also, that reminds me, Safa, I have a book, an online book called The Ramadan Survival Guide. And in that book, it is a complete menu and meal plan and lots more detail about the stuff we discussed today and more. So it's RamadanSurvivalGuide.com. You can go there. I'll put the link after I'm done with the video. I'll put the link in the comments. So because that giving a whole diet on the chat was not really practical. I feel too thirsty during the fast. Please suggest something. Again, I went over kind of like a schedule for drinking at the beginning of the webinar. So as soon as we're done, you can go back and watch. Iman, yes, you will be able to go back and listen to the recording. What is the best type of exercise? Oh, I did that too. You're going to have to go back and listen to the recording. We talked about that. What about raw sugar? It's still sugar. It is still sugar, even raw sugar. I prefer raw. All right, I think I'm back. I froze for a minute. I prefer raw sugar over other types of sugar, but it's still sugar. It's still going to react the same way in your body. So it doesn't matter whether the sugar is raw or... Raw sugar will it reacts the same way in your body as white sugar, but that acts differently than high fructose corn syrup. Fructose and glucose, they are very similar, but they act very differently. So fructose, which is part of high fructose corn syrup, and you would also find that in honey and in fruits. So when we talked about dry fruits and fruit juice, the difference between fructose and glucose is the way it's metabolized. Fructose, even if you're staying within your calorie count, even if you are not overeating, a part of those calories will be converted into fat, right? So you should minimize the fructose in your diet, right? And if you know, and there's lots of different sugars, you can Google what's fructose and what's glucose, right? So you can use Google for that. How do you get rid of headaches in Ramadan? I would say if this is the only time you get headaches, then it could be from dehydration. That is actually a very common side effect of people being dehydrated. So I would say to make sure that you are drinking water and make sure that you are eating high water content foods. So obviously stuff like watermelon, but also cucumbers and lettuces and pears and berries. All of those have a really high water content. And so in addition to your water, you should be trying to design your meals in a way that you can maximize the amount of water that you intake along with your nutrients. Obviously, you get other nutrients from fruits. So that was what I would suggest if you're getting headaches during Ramadan. Be very conscious of how much water that you're taking in, and keep a diary of your foods and your headaches, because sometimes more often than not, when people have random headaches, so you haven't been diagnosed with migraines or whatever, and you're just all of a sudden starting to get headaches, or you get headaches during a specific time of year, or some people get them specifically around finals and it has to do with stress. Some people get them specifically like in the summertime, and they don't realize that it's because it's the only time they eat ice cream and it's a response of their body against the lactose. So I would say keep a diary so you know what triggers the headaches. Elfrida wants to know a brand of protein powder. I use two brands. I use one brand that's called Elite Protein, and I use another brand that's called ProGrade. So ProGrade is from organic free range cows, and it's a little bit more expensive, but you have to order it online. Again, I'll put that in the link in the comments below. But Elite is something you can buy from most most health food stores like GNC, Vitamin Shop, things like that. If you're in the US. If you're outside the US, I don't really know what brands they carry outside the US. What would you recommend as a sweetener? It depends on what you're sweetening and why. So as a sweetener in general, I just use raw sugar. My philosophy is a little bit of the real stuff is better than a lot of the fake stuff. So I personally don't use artificial sugars. I think Allah has designed nature perfectly, and if Allah gave it to us in nature, then alhamdulillah, I am grateful to use it, but I personally don't use artificial sugars. Can you work out after Taraweeh? Yes, you can. That was one of the times we recommended earlier. Do you have any recommendations when it comes to caffeine intake for tea and coffee drinkers? Oh, Aisha, you are my coffee and tea buddy. Let's touch hands. I know, that's my biggest concern. Coffee. I'm gonna miss my coffee. So here is the thing about coffee, which is actually good news. And I actually just found this research in the last year. So we have been told that decaf is a diuretic, that it dehydrates us. The studies show that that's not true. So what does that mean? That means we can drink coffee and not worry about it exacerbating the dehydration. So here is why. So what the study has shown is that when people drink caffeine, when they drink coffee, they do not put out more urine than a regular day. It may cause you to use the bathroom sooner, but it is not going to it's not going to dehydrate you and have you to, it does not pull water out of your system. So that has actually proven to be not true. So you can feel free to enjoy your coffee and your tea. And you see how much I'm smiling about that, right? We can have coffee and tea. That's really going to help with the tarawih after the long days of fasting. So that is good news. What about whey protein? That's not natural. Yes, whey protein is natural. Whey protein is a separation of milk. It's like the casein protein. So there's whey, there's casein in milk, and then there's the lactose sugar. There's the sugar. And whey protein, yes, it is natural. It comes from milk. And I don't recommend it over casein protein. Casein protein is still the best. Why? Because whey protein digests in about 4 hours. Casein protein, again, takes 7 to 12 hours. You're going to be full longer. And I'll preempt the next question somebody might have. What about vegetarian-based proteins like hemp and pea? They are alternatives, and no, they do not hold a light. They don't hold a candle to what casein protein can do for your fullness. So it's an alternative. If you don't drink milk, or you don't drink animal proteins, or you're a vegan or a vegetarian, and you prefer to do, then that's fine if that's what works for you. But physiologically, it is not the equivalent to the way that it is metabolized. Let me adjust that. Now, with the science of nutrition, they have created vegetarian protein powders that combine different sources that creates a whole protein that, in its amino acid profile, these specially combined vegetarian proteins, its amino acid profile is equivalent to a animal-based protein like whey, but it is not metabolized like whey and casein, which means it is metabolized much quicker in your system, right? Whey takes 4 hours, pea takes about 2 hours, whey takes about 4 hours, casein again 7 to 12 hours. So the amino acid profile, thanks to the science of nutrition, has been adjusted for vegetarians to be able to have pea and hemp and a combination of so that they can avoid animal products, but it is not metabolized the same. It's metabolized much, much quicker. Honey as a sweetener in coffee works for you. Awesome. I'm not a honey and coffee, I'm a honey and tea person if I have tea, but okay. Can honey be used while cooking? I would also say for people who are, I just want to say this really quickly, is for people who are diabetic or pre-diabetic, or if you have that genetic tendency, I don't recommend honey in general because it sends your insulin. I shouldn't say, that's not true. Honey has lots of benefits. So if you're sick, it's great. If you're having it periodically, it's great. But I don't recommend it as a substitution for all of your sweeteners because, one, it's fructose. Number two, it is very high on the glycemic index and has a high glycemic load, which means it sends your insulin level spiked immediately. So there are benefits to it. Yes, I know it is one of the foods of the Sunnah and one of the foods that the Prophet liked, but even he did not eat it every single day. So I just remind you of that. But so I don't recommend it as a substitution for everything because eating too much of it can spike your insulin. I have about 5 more minutes. So I'll take a few more questions. Amal, casein protein. So it's casein, not casein. It is a milk-based protein that I recommend for suhoor. Again, you can go back to the beginning of the video and or rewatch it to see where I mentioned those things at. What is the best way to break the fast and not feel bloated or lazy? the best way for you to avoid laziness, or as they say, we say in the African American community, getting the itis, is when you eat a really good meal and then you feel really tired afterwards. We call that getting the itis. So one thing that I would recommend is that you reduce the amount of carbohydrates that you are having during iftar. That one of the components of poultry is, it's called tryptophan. It's a molecule in poultry, and it actually makes you tired. So I would say reduce the amount of food that you're eating. And if you are feeling bloated when you break fast, then you should be keeping a food diary to figure out which one of the foods that you're eating is causing you to feel bloated, because that means your body doesn't like that and you should probably avoid it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just milk or some of the more common foods. Everybody's body reacts differently. Some people can't handle rice or pasta, or so I would suggest that you keep a food diary and really kind of figure out what works for your body, and be very open to discovering anything that you can, because our body changes as we get older. When I was a teenager, I could eat as much ice cream as I want. Now that I'm older, I'm a little bit more lactose intolerant. So the body changes. So be open to know that it could be anything. The bread could be making you feel bloated. Some people are allergic to yeast, so it's not the bread itself. So they can do something like a tortilla or chapati, right? But you can't do a naan because it has yeast in it. So I would say pay attention to the foods. Write it down. Don't try to just remember. Literally write it down. Foods during suhoor, we talked about that. Foods after iftar, we talked about that. Is it okay to drink too much water after breaking fast? I don't know what that means, drinking too much water after breaking fast. We talked about the importance of water and taking in small amounts. So you can review the video after we're done. Fasting for very long hours, what would you recommend? Eating between iftar and suhoor. I would recommend that if you are already following a healthy eating plan, or if your food sources is already healthy, then you can just reverse your schedule. And for example, I like Greek yogurt for a snack, so I may bring a Greek yogurt with me to the masjid to eat in between tarawih, right? So yesterday I had it for snack at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So next week, when it's Ramadan, I'll have it at 10 o'clock at night, right? So I'm just reversing what I like to eat. Workout gear for Muslimah. Jetta wants to know about workout gear for Muslimah. So alhamdulillah, there are a lot of new companies that have workout gear. So a couple of the ones that I reviewed that I really like is there's Mu'min Active. I like that one. I didn't review the other two, but I do have a Verona workout top, and I do like that. And I have never I do not own or have Leo wear, and so I don't know how it feels physically, but it looks really cool. Shout out to Latifa. They look blazing. That is but for what I do, I go between all of them. It depends on what I'm doing. So it depends on what activity that you're doing. So for example, if it's really hot, then I may not be able to wear one of them, but I can wear it on a cool day, kind of like that. So that is what I would recommend. Breaking fast with dates and cantaloupe. Sure, if that works for you, there's nothing against it. What else? I think that's it. So we are coming to the end of our time. And you know what? I want to remind you of two things. One, I will be here, inshallah. I'm making my intentions to do this, to talk about some relevant topic every Monday at 11 a.m. Inshallah. Make dua that I'm able to stay consistent, because I really like sharing with you guys. So hopefully I will be consistent. The second thing is that every Wednesday I have a radio show, and I invite you to tune in, particularly this week. So I'm super excited about this week, because Wednesday morning I will have Dr. David Katz as a show guest. He is a researcher. He is a lifestyle expert, a healthy lifestyle expert. He's written books. He's ran the Griffin Medical Center, which is an integrative medicine center. He's the founder of an integrated institution. So it should be really good. I'm really excited about Dr. Katz coming on the show. So that is Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. and you can listen live stream. I will post the link. So remember, Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. And I think that's it. Did I miss anything? So the next time that I talk to you, it may be the first day of Ramadan. That is going to be great. And so what I will do is, what I'd like to talk about, and I think I'll talk about it next week, is I have had a lot of, and recently just sent an email about PCOS, and there's been a lot of women who get diagnosed with it, and they don't know what to do in terms of what to eat and what and how to move. And there are some very specific things that women with PCOS can do to help themselves. It's a little harder to lose weight, but with the right strategies, you certainly can. So we are going to talk about that next week, and whatever else your heart desires, my darlings. All right, so I'll talk to you then. Assalamu alaikum.